Well, I'm so pleased that joining me today is Michele Booth Cole. She's an attorney and she's the executive director of Safe Shores, the D.C. Children's Advocacy Center. And many of our viewers know that I was a federal prosecutor, but at the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C., you prosecute local cases as well as federal cases. And so I prosecuted child sex crimes with the help of the victim witness advocates at Safe Shores. Safe Shores folks really trained me in interviewing child victims and protecting them. So Michele, thank you so much for joining me to talk about this really important issue.
Well, Sunny, thank you so much for remembering your time in D.C., your days as a prosecutor, and for remembering Safe Shores. We really appreciate the opportunity to come and help you raise awareness.
Well, thank you. And please tell our viewers a bit about Safe Shores and the work that you do there.
Sure. Well, the D.C. Children's Advocacy Center, also known as Safe Shores, is one of hundreds of children's advocacy centers that exist across the United States. Children's advocacy centers are designed to reduce the trauma and promote healing for child victims of physical and sexual abuse. So rather than have a child go to multiple people to talk about an allegation of abuse, talk to the police officer, talk to the social worker, they've probably maybe disclosed to a counselor at school, talk to the prosecutor, all separately. What children's advocacy centers do, and what we do at Safe Shores, is we bring all those professionals together in one place to observe the child via closed-circuit television, and that child talks to a trained forensic interviewer who does nothing but talk to children about traumatic events. And that way, everybody can get the information they need, but the child really is put first in terms of their needs, sensitivity to their developmental level, and then the whole system, the whole process revolves around the needs of that child.
I remember, Michele, those meetings very, very well. And let me ask you this, because I think that parents oftentimes just miss the signs, right? They just miss the signs. And we're hearing that in this case, especially with alleged victim 9. He says he told his mother that Jerry Sandusky was touchy-feely. He didn't want to go back to Jerry Sandusky's house, and she still had him go back. So tell our viewers, how can the grandparents that are watching our show, the parents that are watching our show, the aunts and uncles, how do they know when their loved ones are being abused?
That's a great question, and we're so glad to take this awful, awful case and use it to raise awareness about how we can keep children safe. So the awareness piece is so critical because the national data tell us that 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be sexually abused by the time they turn 18. That's a lot of children, and that means that there's a lot of this happening. So one of the key things that we try to teach, we do training around child sexual abuse prevention, and the awareness piece is huge. Being aware of where your children are, who they're with, being aware of the incidence of child sexual abuse and how widespread it is. We encourage parents and caregivers to ask questions about what the policies are of the organizations that their children are entrusted to, whether they're schools, summer camps, faith institutions. There should be policies on one adult, one child relationships. That's really critical to make sure that those things are monitored and that the institution providing the services is aware of who's with children at any given time. We also encourage people to report any suspicion or certainly any knowledge of abuse. The standard, as you know, in the District of Columbia, as it is most places, is a reasonable suspicion of abuse. So what we see here is the real power relationship, and this is what we have to be mindful of. Adults have so much power over children, and particularly people in lofty positions, people with titles, and it sounds like there was so much deference and so many assumptions given based on Jerry Sandusky's title, his position in the community, and we can't assume that just because someone has a title or a lofty position that they keep children safe. And so we really have to use our seasoned eye, our awareness to keep our vigilance about the safety of our children wherever they are and whomever they're with.
Now, Michele, what we're also hearing about during this trial is the grooming process. And I started talking about that probably last year when this story first broke. And I got a lot of flack when I said, oh my goodness, he's taking a shower, he's pushing the boundaries with the boys. This is classical grooming. Can you please explain to our viewers sort of the signs or the process of grooming?
Absolutely. Sonny, you are so on point. You definitely haven't lost your prosecutor's edge. You've got this down. You know, grooming, it's fascinating because there are two levels of grooming, and it sounds like it was happening on two levels. One, there's the grooming that the pedophile or the perpetrator does with the child, and that is to build that relationship, to build that trust, to build that rapport. It can happen from things like giving gifts or special trips or special access to things. It comes with giving attention. Oh, you're so smart, you're so special, you're the best player on the team, I'll spend some extra time with you. It also is about testing the boundaries of that child, just like you said, testing their physical boundaries. Will that child let me touch them? If we play a tickle game, if we play a wrestling game, they assess, has anybody taught that child about boundaries? And that's why it's so important that parents and caregivers have regular, constant conversations with their children about the safety and privacy of their own bodies. The other grooming piece, though, that is so critical here is that, you know, pedophiles will groom adults, and that is to raise the comfort level of the adults who are responsible for the children that that perpetrator wants access to. So they want mom to feel comfortable with them. They want grandma, auntie, uncle to feel comfortable with them. And they will do or say whatever they need to do to make people around them comfortable.
I love that you brought up that point, the grooming of the parents as well, sort of pushing those boundaries. And I know that you wrote an article in the Washington Post. I read it. I just think it's so important. It's so incredible. And you call it a sleepover nightmare. How can we keep our children safe? And I will tell you, sleepovers, in my experience, is when a lot of this conduct happens, when your child is not sort of under your watchful eye. So let's, for our viewers, go over these 7 tips that you give in this article about keeping your children safe when they are in the care of someone else.
Yeah, and I guess, are they posted? Because I'll be honest, I am here in this place by myself, so if you can read the first one and then I'll go over it. I don't have anything with me, so.
Yes, no problem. We do have them posted. Now, one, you say use accurate language. What do you mean by that?
This is what I was talking about. You know, there's a real opportunity to build our children's power to control to some degree what goes around them. And that happens by teaching them the proper language for their body parts, teaching them what's appropriate touching, who should be touching them. One of the victims said nobody had seen him without his clothes other than his parents. And there's a lesson there. I mean, when we take our children to the pediatrician, often pediatricians will say, Mom, Dad, is it okay if I touch your child? We want our children to have a really intact sense of their personal boundaries, and it comes from language, teaching them the proper names for their body parts. There's no shame in any of their body parts. And when we do that, we send a message to people that, hey, somebody's taking time with this child. Somebody is teaching this child their value and what they need to know.
And you also mentioned teaching boundaries, opening their eyes, know who's supervising your children. Another tip is talk openly, get educated, and then finally you say practice what you preach. Can you discuss this sort of teach boundaries, open their eyes, and most importantly, and I love this point, know who's supervising your children?
Yeah, let's start with the know who's supervising your children. You know, the challenge is, for many of us, I know I have 3 daughters. I've always worked full-time since after each of them was 3 months old. And the challenge is we live in a world where things move so fast. We live in a, you know, BlackBerry, respond to my voicemail, everything has to happen quickly. And the reality is that when you're trying to parent children, if you're doing it well, it's really inconvenient, let me be very clear, because you got to slow down. You have to slow down and take the time to know the organizations, the individuals who are watching your children. Ask about background checks. Ask for information about what the policies are of those organizations. If it's somebody's home, know those people. Don't just drop your child off at the doorstep. Go in, have a conversation beforehand. I mean, I know that I call or I'll stop by if I've not met the parent, because one of my children is older now. I will say, who's going to be in the house? Who's going to be supervising the children? Who else is attending the party? Ask those questions and don't be afraid. We want to empower parents in their role as their child's primary caregiver. So that's key. And then the one adult, one child policies of any institutions, again, are really important. And make sure your child, when they come home, whether it's a day at school or it's a day at a play date, that they can tell you what happened and that they feel comfortable recounting to you the series of events. What did you do? What did you have for lunch? What did you play? Who else was around? And if you are constantly talking to your child, the lines of communication are open, that won't feel like an interrogation. That'll just feel like a regular conversation that mom or dad always has.
That's right. I mean, when my children come home, I have the give me your highlight and your low light of the day every single day while we're eating dinner. Finally, I don't have that much time with you, and I wish I actually had more because I could speak with you about this to educate our viewers all day. But give us a sense of the profile of a predator, because I think many people think that a predator doesn't look like a Jerry Sandusky. A predator, it looks like a monster, and that's just, and a predator has this sort of sexual offender history. That's not necessarily true, as you know.
Thank you for raising that, Sunny. I mean, here's what we do know. The majority of children who are sexually abused are abused by someone they know or their family knows. The majority, it's over 90% of cases. The stranger in the park, the stranger danger, while that does happen, it is the minority of cases. The fact is, abuse is about abuse of trust and relationships. And so we know that pedophiles can look like anyone. They are fathers, they are coaches, they are faith institution leaders, they are neighbors, they are cousins, they are relatives. I mean, that's the sad part of this. It's very difficult for people to imagine that people that they know and trust could do these things, but it does happen. And if we don't entertain the reality that it happens, then we place our children at greater risk by denying it.
Michele Booth Cole, I cannot thank you enough coming here. She's the executive director of Safe Shores. Thank you so much for coming and really teaching our viewers about this very important issue. I hope I can have you back.
Thank you so much. Oh, thank you. I'd be glad to. Thank you, Sunny.
Thanks.